Hello, Joanna.
Hello. Hi,
Welcome.
Seray.
Welcome to BIFET, Bozcaada International Festival of Ecological Documentaries. Before to start, let's see a short clip from your film trailer, okay?
Sure.
Herkese hoş geldin demek istiyorum öncelikle BİFET'e, Bozcaada Uluslararası Ekolojik Belgesel Filmler Festivali'ne bu yıl online yapabiliyor olacağız ama umarım en kısa zamanda Bozcaada'da buluşabiliriz. Şu an hemen söyleşiye başlamadan önce, Q&A'ye başlamadan önce Joanna'nın filminden To Calm the Big Pig Inside içindeki domuzu yatıştırmaktan bir short klip, kısa bir klip seyredeceğiz. Efendim, söz sizde.
Iswihapos mga tao kabayat sa buwak, ang baboy ilawap sa yuta, na kung masuko, nagkurog daw ang yuta. Kung syakit tayo ng mga tao, buwak, kung maglinog, ano makalmang baboy sa ilawang daw. Pero waki ko kadungog storya kung unsang pagpakalma sa hangin sa bagyo. Unsang paglikay ng storm surge.
Okay, welcome again. Joanna, first of all, I think this is the very emotional and very impressive part of one of the scenes in your film, because you are, taking your text, not only, your personal story, but also a kind of cultural, and political environment, and some excerpts from these cultural and environmental things in your film. Buva, for example, you said that you are using that term for earthquake, and it is very kind of metaphorical thing. And we also have a kind of sense how the people approach to the natural events or disasters. Could you please, make a comment on this, subject, especially Buva, and also the title of your film, To Calm the Pig Inside. Ben öncelikle şunu sormak istiyorum. Filmde aslında çok etkileyici bir sahneyi gördük. Deprem ya da işte tayfun gibi doğal felaketlerde Filipinler'de buva denildiğini ve aslında bir yani böyle aslında kültürel bir referansla bir domuzu içine dünyanın içindeki bir domuzu yatıştırmak için kullanıldığını öğreniyoruz. Ben de Joanna'dan bunun üzerine bize bir şeyler söylemesini söyledim. We really want to learn about, these cultural term or, belief in Philippines. For typhoon or earthquakes.
Yeah, so we do have still a lot of fables and myths going around, but one of the things in the Philippines is we really have a lot of natural disasters happening, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's typhoons. We're hit with typhoons, at least 20 a year. And then, just last month we had another earthquake here, but not as strong.
20 you said?
20
in a year?
20 in a year. Yeah.
Okay. Let me translate. Yani Joanna bu tür hikayelere çok inanıldığını söyledi ülkesinde. Ve bunun dışında da gerçekten doğal felaketlerle çok sık karşılaşıldığını, örneğin çok hafif atlatılan bir tayfunu yakın zamanda yaşadıklarını ve bir yıl içinde 20 defa olabildiğini söyledi. Yes.
So what had happened was most of the times these earthquakes or these typhoons are not as deadly as that year in 2013. But that year, I'm from an island called Cebu. We had an earthquake in a neighboring island, and it was one of the largest earthquakes in a very long time. And so I ended up volunteering at that earthquake. But one of the reasons I volunteered was because of all the politics behind it. And, people were saying how the relief wasn't getting to the people because of the politics. And sure enough, when I was there, I started meeting people, and then they told me about this this fable about this pig inside the earth, and I was quite intrigued by that. And 3 weeks later, when the same exact thing happened in Tacloban during Haiyan, I didn't think it could get any worse, but of course it became much worse. So first there was a natural disaster, and then there was the way the disaster was handled. So of course that made me think of that fable, and I thought from day one I knew the film had to be named after this bua, or after this pig inside the earth somehow. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Yani bu aslında dediğim gibi hani çok fazla tayfun oluyor ama hiç bu kadar ölümcül sonuçları olduğu gibi yaşanmamıştı. 2013'te olduğu gibi Yolanda tayfunuyla birlikte. Özellikle Cebu'da ve onun yakınındaki bir adada çok ölümcül sonuçları oldu. Ben bu sırada gönüllü oldum. Çünkü bütün bunların arkasındaki hem politik gelişmeler, hem yardım malzemelerinin ulaştırılmaması, hatta bundan daha kötü olamaz dedikten hemen 3 hafta sonra Tacoba, you said 3 weeks later.
Tacloban.
Tacloban.
Okay, Tacloban is the name of the town, yeah.
Okay. Bir başka Tacloban isimli bir başka kasabada çok daha beterini gördük. O yüzden ben bu gönüllü olduğum sırada duyduğum pek çok şey vardı. Buva da onlardan biriydi ve ilk andan itibaren aslında Buva'nın filmin ismi olacağını biliyordum. To calm the pig inside. Yes. You said you became a volunteer. And this is one of the important, aspect in your film we see, because all these relief goods, all these aid, all these help work coming from a kind of solidarity between ordinary people, coming from NGOs, coming from survivors, and coming from like you, volunteers. This is the same situation actually we also lived in this summer, for example, in Turkey. During the fire, all these big fires lasted for days, for example. The main, power came from ordinary people, which can be seen also in your case. Okay. Let me translate and then give the word to you. Gerçekten filminde görüyoruz ki temel olarak aslında bütün bu yıkıcı ve ölümcül felakette en çok yani hükümetten ya da başka bir yerden değil, sıradan insanların birbirleriyle dayanışmaları, Joanna gibi gönüllü olan insanlar ya da sivil toplum kuruluşlarının dayanışmasıyla üstesinden gelinmeye çalışıldığını görüyoruz. Yes, Joanna, you can go on now.
Yeah, what's very interesting. So the typhoon and this earthquake happened in 2013, and this film actually just premiered in 2020, and premiered in the Philippines last August, right when we were having Senate hearings again, but now because of the pandemic, COVID-19, and again there's all this corruption happening, And then in October of last year, we had 3 major typhoons that also came through. So it felt like, I don't know, it felt a bit like deja vu. And in the end, a few months later, just a few months ago, I spent on an island because starting to film a new project. And one of the reasons I started filming was, again, this island, it's normally a tourist island, but they were not really getting that much help from, from the government, I suppose, or it just wasn't enough. But what happened during this pandemic, but it was amazing because, everybody on this island, which is normally, driven by tourism, people were still contributing. People were still lining up to help because even though they were suffering, say their businesses, they saw other people that were in much worse case scenarios. So, yeah.
Yani bu film 2013'te çekildi. Hem tayfun ve depremin olduğu bir dönemde. Özür dilerim. Yolanda'nın yaşandığı felaket, tayfun ve depremin olduğu yıl 2013'tü. Bu film 2020'de çekildi ve aslında aynı şeyleri yaşıyor gibiyiz. Geçen Ağustos ayında Covid-19 nedeniyle yani Senato yapıyordu bununla ilgili ama yolsuzluklarla uğraştığı nedeniyle gene çok bir şey yapmadı. Ekim'de geçen yılın Ekim ayında 3 tane yine büyük tayfunlar yaşadık ve benim için her seferinde bu bir dejavuya dönüşüyordu. Yakın zamanda bir adada yaşadım. Yine benzer bir şey yaşandı ama hükümetten yeterli destek alınamadı. Adada çoğu insan turizmle yaşıyor, geçimlerini sağlıyor ve bu insanlar iş yerlerinden dolayı aslında zarar görseler de yine kendilerinden daha zor durumda olan insanlara yardım etmek için oradaydılar, yardım ettiler dedi özetle Joana. So I mean, even though these, typhoon and earthquakes or natural disaster, like you said, is a very ordinary. A part of. Can be a part of their daily life. Nowadays, maybe, and also, government attitude and all these. Things also a common thing, ordinary thing. They are doing the same thing and nature is doing the same thing. Hükümetin tavrı da aynı, doğanın tavrı da aynı. Is there any kind of, working on it or to prevent, to get the less harm from these natural disasters? Is there any kind of, except from the, people's support to each other, is there any kind of official, prevention or thinking about that, Joana?
That's a really good question. Well, what has happened? So as I mentioned in the film, for example, I said they didn't really have a word for storm surge. But one thing I've noticed since Haiyan, since Yolanda, since this super typhoon, since then, whenever there's flooding going on or whenever there's some kind of earthquake about to happen, we always get this message now. I don't know what you call it, but on the phone, your phone just like shakes and it gives us warnings.
Yeah.
That, there's a flood happening just north of you or just south of you or something like this. So at least that's one thing that's changed a little bit. But in terms of maybe bigger infrastructure or maybe more relief aid, I'm not entirely sure. For example, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and I've just talked to so many people who really can, despite the many, well, I don't want this necessarily to be a political discussion, but, people are always talking about, okay, we're in so much debt now, but yet they can't rely on the government really for the relief that's going on at the moment.
This is everything is related with politics, Joana. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a really, political discussion and deserves, to discuss it. Ben yani herkes aynı konumunu sürdürürken hani bu konuda herhangi bir şey var mı? Yani bunca deneyim ve bunca yaşanmışlıktan sonra hükümetin, devletin aldığı herhangi bir önlem var mı diye sordum. Yolanda'da yani bu süper tayfun olarak adlandırılan işte sel ve depremin her şeyin olduğu dönemde aslında hiçbir şey yani yapılmadığını, bir de ama yeni bir gelişme olarak şöyle bir şey olduğunu söyledi. Bu tür doğal felaketler öngörülebilir olduğundan telefon titreşim yapıyor ve alarm veriyormuş, en azından böyle bir şey olmuş hazırlıklı olmak için. Ama tabii büyük altyapısal sorunlar devam ediyor. Bir de pandeminin ortasında olmak, pandemi sırasında yaşananlar da insanların artık hani devlete hiçbir şekilde güvenmemelerini beraberinde getirmiş. Yolanda, that's why I said, I found very political your film, also very personal, and even though it is very hard, and heartbreaking, what you lived in Philippines in 2013, and after that, not only, deaths because of super typhoon, but after that, people suffered because of, not getting these aids, relief goods, or not getting anybody caring about them. And like you said, this is a kind of a big trauma, maybe passes to the next generations. And you witnessed, you were there, and you witnessed all of them. How was it? It is maybe destroyed, kind of destroyed town we see in your film, but we cannot see destroyed souls after these traumatic events, because not only typhoon damage, like I said, after typhoon, all these things, like the drawings in the kids' pictures, we see that, very heartbreaking, things happened. How do people feel about that? And do you think that this trauma will go on?
Yeah, so one of the issues I think we still have to face really in the Philippines, but maybe I'd like to think slowly they're working on it, is actually mental health. So I know at least back then they weren't really addressing this because the problem was just way too big. So for example, one of the things so after the typhoon, what had happened was I started a scholarship program in Tacloban, as well as another town called Giwan. And so that's how I got to know more students and more teachers. And that's how I got to hear many more stories. So, one of the stories the teachers told me, for example, where they were like, we were affected as well. Our homes were also flooded, and we also encountered all these dead people, and we needed help. But what did the government give us? They're like, they came over and they gave us lipstick. I said, what? So yeah, they're like, they said we really need more mental health help somehow. So unfortunately, I don't think that was really addressed. But saying that, fast forward, as I mentioned, with a typhoon that happened last year, a lot of people from Tacloban and Giwan that I know of also tried to help, because they know that so many people from locally and internationally help them. So when the typhoons happen elsewhere in the Philippines, they also came and helped and gave their experience somehow, who to tap maybe for certain areas. So that's one good thing that happened, I think. Yeah.
Ya özetle Yolanda bir süre sonra başka bir adada işte bir scholarship programa katılmış ve orada öğrencilerle, öğretmenlerle daha fazla birlikte olmuş. Oradaki onlardan pek çok hikaye dinlemiş. Özetle hani ya çünkü çok ciddi bir hani yani çocuklarda ve bütün bu insanlarda yani bir ciddi bir biçimde aslında bir travma yaşamışlar. Yani çevrelerinde ölüler var, günlerce gömülmeyen yağmurun ve sıcağın altında tropik bir ülkede hani günlerce kalmışlar. Dolayısıyla bu yüzden hani bir mental health yani böyle ruh sağlığını, akıl ve ruh sağlığını koruyucu aslında şeylere en çok ihtiyaç duyuyorlarmış. Bunun için de çalışılmış. Ama hani buna ihtiyaç duyarken öğretmenlerden biri bize hani yani başka şeyler verdiler ama bunu vermediler dedi. And I really would like to, I mean, hear from you. I mean, you use black and white images, and even though it's very dramatized, I mean, dramatizing event you pass through, but you didn't dramatize. I mean, you started with the kids who are playing. I mean, in the water, and then all these. I mean. Black and white images and all these, I mean, relate connections. I mean, you put in your film. You also use photographs. I mean, I wonder how did you, I mean, give structure to your narrative, and what was, I mean, yeah, what were your preferences? Yolanda'nın filminde siyah beyaz görüntüler var. Bir çocukların sularda oynamasından giderek bu hikayenin aslında farklı bağlantılarını da anlatıyor. Fotoğraflar kullanıyor. Çok dramatik çok dramatik şeyler yaşanmasına rağmen ölüm ve hani özellikle tayfun sonrası yaşananlar bunu hiç dramatize etmeden bize anlatıyor. Bu tercihi, bu yapıyı, bu anlatıyı nasıl kurduğunu öğrenmek istediğimi söyledim. Okay, your.
So there were so many different ways I could have done this film, and once a friend had convinced me that actually, you know, having spent so much time in these areas and having met so many different types of people, and you know, just my anger when seeing our president at the time, you know, saying, downplaying the numbers, for example, you know, he convinced me this has to be your story too. You have to tell it. Your story is what's going to link everything. So once I decided to make it from a personal point of view rather than a personal point of view, meaning I wanted to share the stories of the children, of the teachers that I had met, stories that I felt weren't really being shared in the media. So I said, so once I decided that, I knew I didn't necessarily want just, you know, footage of the destruction. I needed really personal images. And that's when I decided to work with photojournalists. And luckily, I was able to work with two photojournalists. One is Filipino, VJ Filafranca, and the other one's Thai, Piavit Tongsaard, who they both spent so much time there during after the typhoon. In fact, VJ wasn't just working on Tacloban. He actually did a book on climate change, related to climate change, and seeing how it's affected the Philippines. But so when Yolanda happened, that's why he spent all this time there. So VJ's photos tend to be black and white, and because he tends to do very sensitive and personal images, we first tried to put it together with colored, but it just didn't work. It brought you in and out of the film somehow. So then we decided to just make the whole film black and white. And at the very last moment, I changed my mind and said, okay, the whole film will be black and white except the children's illustrations, because when the children actually told me their stories, or first they drew for me, and then I just asked them to relay what they drew for me. And when they told it to me, you could see that they were still very much, the typhoon was very much still present for them. So that's
Yeah.
why I had to make that colored. Yeah.
So the children drew for the film for you.
Actually, no, it wasn't for the film. It was for my scholarship initiative. So
Okay.
basically, yeah. So what had happened was, I had, when I was interviewing potential scholars, I said, do you want to share your experience during Yolanda, how you felt during or after or both, and then you can explain to me afterwards what you drew. So it was for our scholarship. So I actually have a lot more illustrations from different classes.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Yolanda, yani kısaca özetlemem gerekirse, aslında bu çok farklı şekillerde anlatılabilirdi belki. Ama başkanın sayıyı azaltması, o sırada devletin yaklaşımına olan kızgınlığım, bir arkadaşımın önerisiyle aslında bütün bu olayların, hikayelerin, her şeyin birbirine bağlayan bir bağlantı kurulabileceğini söyledi. Çünkü medyada paylaşılan hikayeler ölü sayısını resmi olarak düşük göstermeye çalışmaları. Bu da aslında benim bütün bu bağlantıyı kurmam kişisel bir bakış açısını koyarak sağlandı. Ben siyah beyaz fotoğraflardan, kullandığı görüntülerden bahsettim. Bahsetmiştim. O da bu filmde 2 tane fotojurnalist, gazeteci ve fotoğrafçı, yapamadım. 2 fotoğrafçıyla çalıştığını söyledi. Biri Filipinli. And his name was VJ, you said.
VJ Villafranca.
Okay,
Yeah.
VJ Villafranca. O sadece taklaban üzerine çalışmıyordu. Aynı zamanda VJ iklim krizi üzerine, iklim değişikliği üzerinde, iklim değişikliğinin Filipinleri nasıl etkilediği üzerine de çalışan bir gazeteci. Onun çok siyah beyaz fotoğrafları çok duyarlı ve çok etkileyiciydi. Sonra tüm filmin böyle olmasına, siyah beyaz olmasına karar verdik ama orada da benim bu şeyimi yaptığım öğrenim gördüğüm okul nedeniyle bu olaylara ilişkin röportajlar yapıyordum ve çocuklarla da yapmıştım. Çocukların herkese nasıl bir deneyim olduğunu, neler yaşadıklarını soruyorduk. Çocuklar da bu şekilde resim çizerek o dönemi anlattılar ve sadece çocukların olduğu bölümü, onların çizimlerini renkli bırakmaya karar verdim dedi. Özetle böyle özetleyebiliriz. So Joanna, you said that, for example, one of VJ also worked on climate change, how affect to Philippines. Okay, and what's the result of climate change? How affected? For example, I am sure that maybe made these typhoons super, for example. What was the results of climate change when we are talking about specifically about Philippines?
Yeah, so some of my other, the live footage in my film of the typhoon was taken by storm chasers that I had met who were filming in the Philippines. So I filmed with them a few times whilst chasing storms around. But during Haiyan, they were actually in Tacloban filming. And so they go around mostly within Asia, but also
Sanırım bir internet bağlantısı problemi yaşıyoruz ama Joanna canlı görüntülerin canlı görüntüler de var filminde. So I think hi Joanna, welcome again. I think a little. Your internet disconnected.
Yes, sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, so I was talking about these storm chasers, and when we've discussed what, because they've been chasing storms for quite a few years now, and I've asked them what has been the effect. And yes, they said undoubtedly over the years, the storms are just getting stronger and stronger, and it's just, this is just going up. We saw what happened in America, for example, and like you said, all the wildfires, and yeah. So absolutely for the Philippines, so that was the biggest typhoon still. But last year we were faced with, very strong typhoons as well, and complete flooding again. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have another, huge tragedy like Haiyan again soon. I mean, not soon, hopefully not, but in the future. We're bracing for it.
Yeah, I see. Tabii yani tayfunun daha büyük olmasına neden olduğu gibi şeyden bahsetti. Bir takım hani filminde yer alan canlı görüntülerin mesela fırtına peşinde koşan, fırtınaları tespit eden, yani bu tür aşırı hava olaylarını, yani yapabilecek, daha yıkıcı etkileri olabilecek fırtınaları takip eden gruptan bahsetti. Onlar Tacloban'da çalışılıyormuş. Bu tayfunun farklı isimleri var. Yolanda, Haiyan Tayfun, Super Tayfun gibi farklı isimleri var. Bütün bu iklim değişikliğinin elbette bunlarda etkisi olduğunu, hatta çok yakın zamanda yine büyük bir tayfunun gelebileceğini tahmin ettiklerini, endişe duyduklarını söyledi. Joanna, I also wonder, maybe can be our first question, but also can be also the last one. But can we learn about? More information about your works. What you did already screened in big and very prestigious festivals, awarded, and you are especially interested in, ecological problems. Or could you please tell us about, more about your work?
Yeah, so I actually started filmmaking in Beijing, and my very first film was called Neo Lounge. And at the time, I kind of sort of changed my career and just changed my whole life a little bit. So, and in a city that was also reinventing itself. So in the end, I followed people, two main characters or three, basically that had moved to Beijing that were also kind of reinventing themselves. I kind of followed them for 2 years. And subsequently, I did another film called The Old Fool Who Moved the Mountains, which is about 3 generations. It's basically first about a fable in the past that children learn. And then it's also about a bar that's about to be torn down because of the Olympics, because they're developing. This is called the same name. And then also these older people who are musicians back then, back during the Cultural Revolution. So for example, just in these first 2 films alone, I realized one of the things I like doing is I like I like looking at cycles, seeing what repeats itself a little bit. So it started with those 2. And actually, Beijing was in the middle of kind of destruction and construction. And when I started filming again in the Philippines, I realized, is this all I always film? I'm always filming destruction and I guess sort of trying to build up after that. So in a way, I think that's what ties my films together a little bit. It's this idea of what do we carry on, even though we try to move away from it? What carries on to the next, through our life, I suppose. And lately, I have been following stories related to personal trauma or collective trauma, as you say, and just trying to understand how people cope with that or deal with it somehow, or how it affects you, even when you didn't realize you're affected.
Yes, I see. And it is very, um, let me make a short comment about that. Because maybe you are dealing with, reconstruction, because you are, and your film can be a part of this reconstruction, can be a part of writing a memory history, not in an official way, unofficial way, and also keeping memories, images. This is a kind of, what I see your work is a part of reconstruction or rebuilding. People, environment, city, town. Which I really appreciate. And you are doing this in a very artistic and sentimental, undramatized, but full of emotions. And also very poetic way. Thank you very much for that. But let me first translate what you said about your work in general. Yolanda 2007'de No Launch filmini yapıyor. Kısaca şey yapacağım. 2008'de The Old Fool Who Moved to Mountains filmini yapıyor. Burada da farklı kuşaklar var. Aslında sanırım diyor benim işlerimde hep birbirini tekrar eden şeyler var. O döngülere bakıyorum. Kendini tekrar eden yıkım ve yeniden yapım süreçleri var. Bunlara bakıyorum dedi. Ve de bunların aslında kişisel travma ya da işte kolektif travmanın gelecek kuşaklara nasıl kaldığına bakıyorum dedi. Ben de bu noktada yani genel olarak işlerine ilişkin şöyle bir yorumda bulunmak istedim. Aslında o hani yıkım ve yeniden yapıma baktığını söylerken onun işleri de Joana'nın işleri de aslında o yeniden yapımın, sağalmanın, ayağa kalkmanın bir parçası olarak görülebilir. Üstelik bunu gerçekten çok duyarlı ve çok sanatsal bir formda hem bir hafıza kaydı ve hafıza kaydı hem de aslında sağalmanın bir parçası ya da işte bunu gayri resmi biçimde anlatmanın bir parçası olarak gördüğümü söyledim. Aynı zamanda Joanna bizimle VJ'in kitabı yani iklim kriziyle ilgili, değişikliğiyle ilgili kitabının adını paylaşmış. Filipinler'de yayınlanmış bu kitap. Sinios. I just saw your message saying VJ's book. Let me tell also let me also share with our audience. And also there are some other comments like Petra, the director of our festival, BIFET. Petra, thank you for your wonderful film, poetic and touching. She sent her message. And also we have another message from Sabah Deniz Gülensoy. She also thanks for your amazing work. Yolanda, so we came to the end of our Q&A session. Do you want to add something? You also can comment on my comment, or do you want to share with our festival audience here? We really would like to guest you, in our small, beautiful island in Aegean Sea. I hope we will have you maybe next, editions of the festival.
Yeah, I hope so too. Hopefully in the near future when I make another film, that maybe that you would also invite maybe someday. But no, I'm very pleased and happy to be part of the festival. And I really do appreciate your comments because I don't know, it makes you want to make films when sometimes, to be honest, sometimes I don't really know why. It's not logical when I make a film, but then when you feel like somebody really got your film somehow, it feels good. So thank you for your comments.
Okay. We thank you, really. I mean, Joanna, bazen hani filmi yapıyorsunuz ama hani hakikaten mantıklı, anlamlı bir şey yapıyor musunuz diye şüpheye düşüyorsunuz ama bu tür yorumlar gelince hakikaten insan çok memnun oluyor dedi ve teşekkür etti. Sadece benim değil, izleyicilerimizden gelen yorumların da üzerine. Ayrıca ben hani festivalin hani bundan sonraki yıllarda belki şimdi online yapıldığı için ağırlayamadığımız ama belki ileride ağırlayabileceğimizi söyledi. O da ben bir film yaparsam gelirim dedi. O davet edilmek isterim dedi. So we will be hearing forward for your next film, Joanna. And thank you very much for this film. On behalf of BIFAT, on behalf of all these, I mean, solidarity, I mean, people of solidarity, on behalf of Philippines society also. Thank you very much for your film, and thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, and thank you, BFED.
Okay. Ciao.
Take care. Ciao.